Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rams Review podcast. We're talking Derby on the cusp. We're going to talk about a potential new manager for Derby because Derby on the cusp, if reports are to be believed, of appointing Blackburn Rovers boss John Eustace to the points. Now, John Eustace, you might remember, played for Derby about 10 years ago and finished his career with the Rams, but has since subsequently gone into management, had an assistant spell at QPR, had a spell at Birmingham, and then the owners made a weird decision to bring Wayne Rooney in, and Birmingham got relegated. That was bizarre because Birmingham were high flying at the time. And John Eustace ended up at Blackburn Rovers. So we wanted to bring on Ian from the 4,000 Holes podcast, which is a Blackburn Rovers podcast. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Corey. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I wish it was under slightly better circumstances because I would assume you might be a little upset at this.
Yes, you're just walking all over our grave, aren't you, at the moment?
Yes, not tap dancing though, so I'm being relatively polite. Ian, John Eustace is coming in, I think, as Derby manager. It's obviously not 100% officially confirmed. It might be by the time we finish this video, but it's looking 99.9% likely he will be the new Derby County boss.
Yeah.
And my first question, Ian, before we get into who John Eustace is as a manager, Blackburn are sixth in the table. Derby are struggling. Both clubs have a decent history. Both clubs have had success, right? Both clubs would be considered bigger clubs within the championship. Both clubs probably should be at the Premier League. How did Blackburn get to this point that, because I think there was an issue with the previous manager, John Dahl Thompson. They bring in John Eustace. Blackburn are sixth. How come a team in the bottom three after results last night, Derby are fourth bottom? How does this happen? How does a guy look at this and go, Derby's a hell of a lot better situation than Blackburn? And how are you feeling about John Eustace leaving Rovers?
Right, I could wax lyrical on this for hours, so I'll try and spare your viewers and listeners the full pain and anguish. The simple one-word answer is Venky's. So Venky's onus, but they have had a really noticeable change of heart in recent years as to the extent to which they want to fund the club. So for the first few years of their ownership, they seemed quite happy to write checks of 17 or 18 million pounds a year to keep us competitive in the division, and also to pay off the various awful managers that they appointed. So they were paying for their own mistakes in many respects. And then it seems probably most notably, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that the number of outgoings was starting to exceed the number of incoming. And they talked about a player trading model. So they appointed Greg Broughton as director of football. They appointed John Dahl Thomason as their head coach. So the idea being that we would start to develop some players. We have a pretty good academy. How long that will sustain is an interesting point. But we have a decent academy that brings players through. And given our geography, we're quite good at picking up kids that are released from the big city clubs nearby. So City, United, Liverpool, clubs like that. We've got a good track record of taking on youngsters that they discard and making something of them. So it made sense that that was the player trading model. And last January, we sold Adam Wharton. Previous year, a couple of years prior to that, we'd sold David Raya, the goalkeeper, to Brentford with a sell-on clause. So when he went to Arsenal and that deal was formalised, we were due some money from that. We sold Sammy Smodics in the summer. We sold Sam Gallagher to Stoke, amazingly. Well done, whoever was managed to negotiate that deal. So there was a lot of money coming into the club. So from a profit and sustainability perspective, we got a lot of headroom. And the hope was that we would reinvest some of that because the player trading model, that's what we were going to do. We would then spend it on bright young things, try and polish them and sell them on, or bring in players like Sammy Smodics with potential and develop them and sell them on. So the fans could get behind that and could understand the logic of that. The problem has been that we brought in something like 35 million pounds worth of transfer fee income, and we've reinvested hardly anything, 2 to 3 million absolute tops. And where we've reinvested that is not in the sort of profile of player that you could develop and sell on. We are typically signing more mature players, experienced players. We are signing them on short-term contracts. We are signing them on loans. And there comes a point where you sort of say, well, every summer we're going to be losing half of our squad because they've been signed either on 1 year deals or 6 month deals in January. And we've got half a dozen loan players in. So what on earth's going on here? So Venky's seem to have changed their tune to the perspective of Rovers. we want you to be self-sustaining. We want you to be self-financing. And as I say, the 35 million quid that's come in is probably about 2 years running costs to the club. So you could say from January last year, we had enough money to last us 2 years. And that's without signing anybody. So John Eustace should have known what he was walking into in January last year because John Dal Thomason faced exactly the same dilemma where he was made promises, the board failed to keep them, and he sort of said, "Hang on a minute, this just isn't what I signed up for." So Eustace walked into that. In the summer, apparently, he was discouraged by the lack of transfer activity. And in January, he made it abundantly clear that he wanted players of a certain profile, and the club has singularly failed to deliver on that. So he's just reached a breaking point where I suppose, from his perspective, his stock is as high as it possibly could be. Getting Rovers into six is an extraordinary achievement off the back of last season where we stayed up by the skin of our teeth. So for him, I suppose there's lots of potential downside of hanging around at Rovers and little upside. If you believe some of the press that's been written, he was very much on the side of players, trying to get them new deals, trying to get them extensions. He wanted a contract extension because he got only one more full season left on his deal, and the board sort of said, "No, we're not prepared to do that as part of this cost cutting regime." So I think it's kind of like been death of a thousand cuts for John Eustace over the last 6 months in particular, and January just brought everything to a head. Another factor which I think is quite interesting is he obviously left Birmingham, so he wasn't going to go back there. He's not going to get a job in the Premier League, so that rules out Aston Villa and Wolves. The West Brom job came and went. The Coventry job came and went. The Stoke job came and went. He'll not go to Leicester being a former Derby player. He'll not go to Forest for the same reason. So if he was there looking at Google Maps of all the potential clubs that he could join, you're pretty much getting there to it's Derby or nothing. So I think the sacking of Paul Warne has probably brought it to a head. The moment is now from his perspective, so he's decided to bring things to a head. So it's an incredibly frustrating situation that Rovers find themselves in, the fans find themselves in, because this is the third time in the last 4 years that we've been there or thereabouts in January, and the board has singularly failed to capitalise on it. So the question that we're asking of our owners is, what are you here for? What's the point? Because if you're owning us but you're not putting money in, well, just sell us, just get rid of us then. Because if you're not investing and you're not serious about getting back to the Premier League, I just don't understand why here. So that is very much the abridged version. As I say, I could go on for a good couple of hours, but I'll spare you. I'll spare your ears accordingly.
Ian, first of all, any plans, not for you, obviously, because you're an upstanding citizen, any plans to bring a chicken back into Ewood Park and let that run around the pitch like they did last time? Because I remember watching that game and that was hilarious. So if they bring chickens in, I'm all in on that.
It became something of a meme, didn't it? It's something a stick to beat us with. I suspect that the scrutiny procedures at the turnstiles will be upgraded even more on Saturday for the home game against Plymouth. So whilst it will be funny, and there's all sorts of imaginative protests being suggested, the reality of the situation is at Rovers is that we appreciate what the players have done. We appreciate that they're performing out of their skins. And I think the message coming from lots of fan groups and across social media is get behind the players. What Eustace does is irrelevant for whilst the match is being played. What the board and the owners do whilst the match is being played is irrelevant. It's the players on the field. They get our support. They deserve our support. And then out with the games, that's when we can sort of say, well, how do we make our displeasure known and how can we effect change? But the harsh reality of it is, as supporters of Reading are finding out, is if you've got an owner that lives thousands and thousands of miles away, there's not really that much you can do. And let's not forget, they've not done anything illegal in the UK. They're under investigation in India, right enough, but they've not done anything illegal in the UK. So there's no way we can go to the EFL and say, look, they've breached this clause, they've breached this part of the EFL charter. There's just nothing that we can do legally to get them out. All we have to do is to persuade them of the futility of their continued ownership and hope that they decide to move on, because it's It's soul destroying. It really, really is. And Derby fans will appreciate this because back in the day, you had Lionel Pickering, we had Jack Walker, and there were local businessmen made good who wanted the best for their local teams. They were authentic, they were involved, they were passionate about the clubs. And when you go from an owner like that to an owner that's thousands of miles away and doesn't give a monkeys, it's just soul destroying, frankly.
Yeah, it's like buying a house and then just never doing anything to it.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
the shutters are falling off, and you're like, nah, you still own
Yeah.
a house, but it
Yeah,
doesn't make sense.
I've drawn that precise analogy actually when I was on a podcast a couple of years ago. They were asking us about Venkers. So it's a bit like buying a stately home in the UK, but then not spending any money on maintenance and not keeping the gardens up and wondering why visitor numbers are dropping down and wondering why the roof's falling off and wondering why nobody wants to come and visit anymore. Well, just connect these facts. It's there. And Venky's are doing the football equivalent of sort of like neglecting the stately home. So if you want to own a stately home, you buy it knowing that you've got to spend a lot of money on maintenance and upkeep. That's what happens. And if you want people to visit your attraction rather than somebody else's, there's got to be something there worthwhile. And if you're not prepared to spend the money to do that, then you shouldn't really buy a stately home.
Well, Ian, one day the podcast will hit it big, and I will own a stately home, and I will invite you over. But until that case, I won't have any money.
And I will accept that invitation.
Or anything like that. Ian, if the reports are to be believed, Derby are reportedly paying about £500,000 compensation fee to Blackburn Rovers, which goes into the compensation model, and I guess is a pretty significant fee for a manager at championship level. Let's turn to John Eustace here. What kind of manager is John Eustace? Because he was kind of like a holding midfielder, kind of a little bit of a midfielder destroyer. We had him at real back end of his career, and he did great for us. What type of manager is John Eustace, or what type of manager was he at Blackburn Rovers?
Well, I think we saw two John Eustaces. I think the first was when he came in and replaced JDT, and then the second version 2.0, if you will, was at the beginning of the season onwards. So let me talk about last season first of all. When he came in, the players were apparently completely disenchanted with John Dal Thomason because he had the audacity to ask them to come into training twice a day and things like that and come in on Sundays. And so what you've got to bear in mind is John Dal Thomason used to play for Milan. He used to play for Feyenoord. He used to play for sort of like prime premier foreign coaches. So to him, that wasn't asking a great deal. But to some of our players, it was kind of like the thin end of a wedge. We're not having this. So they started to rebel. John Dal Thomason was then getting frustrated for all the reasons that we articulated earlier. He wasn't given the resources to do the job, and players were sold from well, not actually sold at the end of the contract in the case of Ben Barrett and Diaz. Players left, shall we say, and they weren't replaced adequately. So he was being asked to do more and more with less and less. So he was trying to extract every last juice out of the squad that he got, and they sort of said, "No, we're not having this." And it was a relationship that was turning toxic quite quickly. So when they got rid of Thomason, what it needed was I call it the anti-JDT. So you see it so often in football where you'll have a manager that's happy-go-lucky, that's fairly laissez-faire. They get sacked, and then you're replaced with a disciplinarian, and then the players sort of say, "Oh, we don't like the discipline," so he gets sacked, and you go back to the laissez-faire, and so on and so on. So I think Eustace read the room quite quickly. And he sort of said, I need to be a confidant to these players. I need to put my arm around the shoulder. I need to encourage them. I need to be positive. I need to be sportive. I need to defend their corner. And he seemingly did that very well, very quickly. The only problem was it didn't translate to results on the pitch. So we started slipping further and further down the table. We couldn't win a game at home, and that was one of the biggest issues because obviously, the biggest critical audience is going to be your home attendance. I think we had a couple of spectacular away wins, but if you've only got 1,000 supporters there and you've got 15,000 at home, it just doesn't win you the plaudits that you deserve. So it got very, very hairy towards the end of the season. And I'm a massive JDT fan. I have to say, I met him. I had the good fortune to interview him, and he was just so charismatic and so. It was a bit of like a Jurgen Klopp type experience. It's kind of, I just want to be in the same room as this guy because I just love what he says, how he says it, and how he makes me feel. And with John Eustace, I just never got that. I just got, this is a workaday man. He's come in. Well, we're going to go down under him. Poof. What a complete failure that's been. However, we managed to win away at Leeds. We managed to win away at Leicester. We stayed up. And we did that by being very organised. Quite dull, but very organised. And we played off the strength of having Sammy Smodics on the counter. And that got us the points that kept us up. So you're sort of saying, right, okay, that's in the summer. What's going to happen now? So version 2.0, John Eustace, is then about setting us up for this season. And it was more of that, I don't want to concede goals. If you don't concede goals, you've always a chance of getting a point. And if you don't concede goals, there's always a chance you can nick one and we'll get 3 points. And that was very much the model for this season. So not particularly exciting, but it was after the roller coaster ride that was JDT. Just stopping the opposition scoring was quite a novelty for Rovers fans, and we quite enjoyed it. And there's nothing better than as an away fan is being under the cosh for 89 minutes, nicking it 1-0. So go, oh, we mugged them there. And we had a run of results where we won 6 consecutive games at the back end of last year. And that just lifted us from the doldrums right into the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, well, hang on a minute. He's onto something here. He's got a formula. It seems to work. And it was going very well until the injuries started to kick in and the suspensions start to kick in as the games mount up. And some of our key players were out for several weeks, but we had no strength in depth. So I can only imagine, and this is me surmising, that he then went to the board and sort of said, look, January's coming up. All these guys are injured and suspended. We need to do something. And if you do it, we can stay up there. But if you don't, crikey. And they haven't in reality. I don't think they've invested, well, they haven't signed any permanent players other than Cargbo, and they haven't really brought in the proven championship quality. So we look at clubs like Sheffield United, like Middlesbrough, who are bringing in real quality players, and we sort of say, well, that's who we're competing with in the playoff zone. Although Sheffield United will probably go up automatically. They're our nearest rivals. Look what they're doing, and look who we're bringing in. We're bringing in the guy who can't get in Plymouth's team and a guy who can't get in Birmingham City's team, and we're bringing them in on short-term deals or loans. It doesn't really smack of ambition and a real desire. So I think Eustace then will sort of say, well, I can play this way if you give me the tools, but you're not giving me the tools, so I'm not really sure how this is going to unfold. And that is spookily similar to John Dal Thomason, who sort of had a way of playing that needed players with a certain discipline and a certain skill set. And when we couldn't bring enough of them in, the results started to go south. And it to the extent that it was on the anniversary of JDT's departure that all this has blown up. So what we have now in the 9th of February in Blackburn Rovers supporters' calendars is sort of like, change manager day. That's now an official day. I dare say Hallmark will give us greetings cards and things like that to remember it in future. But that's pretty much what's happened. So I think from the perspective of what you can expect, organised, discipline, try and stem the flow of goals going in. Won't be hugely exciting. Play on the counter. Try and nick some 1-0s. Get some points. That will be the model, I think, that you can expect for the rest of the season.
Yeah, fair enough. The mirror images of Blackburn last season and Derby this season, struggling, bringing in John Eustace, potentially needing to win a few games.
There's a lot of parallels.
There are. No strength and depth for either team.
Yeah.
It's
windows closed. There's nothing you can do. You've got what you've got. This is it. Yeah.
Yeah. Seems very eerily similar. Eerily similar. So he's kind of been in this position before. And to be honest with you, Ian, I think I would prefer to play dull football and stay in the championship this season.
Well, that's what we said last year.
Football and go down. That would be personally. That would be Corey's opinion there. I'd take boring football and results any day of the week because we've had boring football with no results and it sucks. So, add the results in there and it looks okay. Ian, what's John Eustace's favorite formation here? What's, if he rolls in and takes the team for QPR, and that's probably a bit of a stretch because you only have a couple of days with the players, but what can we see in the next couple of weeks as John Eustace evolution comes to Derby, in terms of how does he like to set the team up, and tactically, how do they like to get after it?
With us, now I don't know whether this is because it's his favoured formation or he looked at the results the resources that were available to him and he picked the formation. But with us, it was a 4-2-3-1. That was his default setting. So the idea would be that you've got 2 holding midfielders in front of the back 4 to provide that shield. So effectively, you've got 6 players defending, including the goalkeeper. That's 7. So say that was very much we're going to have a they shall not pass defensive line here. And then he liked 2 wide attacking midfielders, shall we say, and a central striker. So we tended to try and rotate the wide players and try and have a midfielder breaking from deep, which is what we did last season with Sammy Smodics. So this season that became Todd Cantwell, and then he would play. He got 3 or 4 wide forwards, and he was trying to rotate to get a flavour. So if you've got the ball and you're attacking, it becomes a 4-3-3 quite quickly. And then the midfielders can augment, and when you're defending, it's basically 10 men behind the ball with one outlet to a central striker. So I don't know much about Derby's squad or its constituent parts, but that was certainly the model that he used at Rovers.
Fair enough. Derby, one of the strengths Derby this year, I called you Derby. Ian, one of the strengths this year for Derby has been set pieces, corners and free kicks and banging in a few different things. Is that something that was a strength for him at Blackburn, or is this something that could also just, hey, you're going into another team and they're also strong at this, so you're adding another string?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, when we had that run of 6 consecutive wins, so many of our goals were coming from set pieces, and you always felt that when we got a corner or a free kick around the penalty area, that you looked at so I suppose we're trying to ape what Arsenal do in the Premier League, which is be innovative in where people make the runs and here there. And it was nice to see us do something other than just a player at the corner look up and just like lump it into the middle, the keeper come out and take it. We're trying to do something a little bit different, whether it's near post flick on, whether it's edge of the area on the ground, whether it's a long one to the back post and somebody nods it back in. So there was some variety there. And he definitely improved us in that area. So if you have a limited squad, as we had last season in particular, then you try to make the most out of it. And what we saw the lone striker doing was trying to hold up the ball and win the free kick that then gives you the set piece. And if the wide attacking midfielder was going down the line, get past the fullback, fall down, get the free kick, and then we've got the set piece. So it's a pretty well-worn trope in football for squads with limited ability, and that's certainly what we did last year, and it worked last year, so we continued it this year.
It's good to hear because Derby's defense has been a strength this season. Obviously, we sold Aaron Cash into Brighton, but we brought in this Norwegian lad named Sandra Langos from Viking, the second such player from the same club that we brought in the same window. And this lad's just different gravy after 2 games, and we have a nice goalkeeper. So it's good with the defensive foundation as well. I think Derby have something there, so it's not like he has to come in and go, man, everything's broken. We just can't score goals. We've not been able to do that since August. So that's obviously
we're not particularly good at it. It's astonishing to think
to do in football.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a measure of efficiency, isn't it? If you can score 1 goal and get 3 points, then that's a really 100% effective footballing machine, and that seems to have been the blueprint that we've tried to adopt with varying degrees of success. We don't often hammer teams. We don't often waste energy getting second and third goals.
Ian, a few minutes left with you today, and I really appreciate your time. How did John Eustace evolve from last year to this year? Obviously, it's a different situation, right? You're coming in mid-season. Somebody else is like left. I'm not going to say in shambles, but it's obviously not gone great because you're coming in. Same with JDT, same with Paul Warren. Did his football evolve at all from like, we just have to stay in this division and I will do whatever it takes to stay in this division? And then when he has that closed season and he has a preseason with him, that his ideas really start to flow. What's the best version of John Eustace, and how is his game adapted from January onward last year to the beginning part of this season? Because we played you guys in the opening match of the season, the one game in which Sammy Schmodox played in the championship, and he ripped us a new one. I'm upset.
Yeah, the one game we scored 4 goals as well.
That makes me angry. But Blackburn looked all right opening night. So how does it change from January trying to just get results to then he has a full time to implement his ideas?
I would say it was an evolution, not a revolution. So I think the biggest single shift obviously was losing Smodics, because he was such an outlet. He was such a catalyst for making things happen. He was such a busy player, energetic, industrious, and a terrific finisher. So you didn't need to give him many chances, and he'd stick the ball in the net. And last year, in particular, it was important that if we were going to win again, we had to score first, because we weren't good at coming back and we weren't good at getting behind a defence that had something to hold on to. So our ideal scenario is, you nick a goal with the first set piece, go 1-0 up, force the opposition to come out, and then you just try and pick them off. So in enough games that worked. So I suspect that over the summer, what we got is those skills and disciplines being practiced more. So the players just got better at them. They understood a lot more. We definitely improved our set pieces. So our set pieces this season were better than last year. So I suspect that's a function of time on the training ground and getting players disciplined, both in how to defend them and how to use attacking situations as well. So I think it was just a case of, look, you did what I wanted you to do last season, and that worked reasonably well. If we do this, and we do more of it, and we do it more often, and we do it better, we'll get better results. And that certainly happened up until the end of the year. And it's really, in January that the wheels started to come off. But that was largely because we didn't have the squad depth to cope with the injuries. I wouldn't say there's anything particularly wrong with the formation or the tactics. It's just that the players that we were putting in were the B choices for their positions, not the A choices. And funnily enough, they weren't quite as good. That's why they weren't in the starting 11. So results tailed off. And if you're only ever going to win games 1-0 and you go a goal down, as a fan watching something, well, the best we're going to get out of this is a point. And I think, there were a couple of games where we showed a bit of resilience and came back. I mean, the local derby away at Burnley, we conceded first but came back. We went a goal down at Leeds late on, but came back to get a point. So you saw, well, right, there is some fighting spirit there. There is some resilience. So I think a lot of the stamp that he has left on the squad has been about having some self-belief and trusting the system. And I think because results were so good in the first half of the season that the players bought into that.
Ian, I'm going to let you go here shortly, but I've got one last question for you before we depart. A bit of a strange one because obviously I know you're a Blackburn Rovers fan and not as intense into Derby as probably what I am. Do you think John Eustace can be a success at Derby? Do you think that he could, with the teams being mirror images, with the way that he set the team up last year and did what he did to save them? Derby have injuries. Derby don't have a lot of squad depth. Derby are kind of like square pegs, round holes sometimes. Do you think he can be a success at Derby? And by success, do you think he can keep him in the championship and then go and build in that close season?
I certainly think he can get you organised, and I certainly think he'll win over the players quite quickly based on what we saw at Rovers. And that's a lot. That's a significant part of the battle. So if you can get players believing that they've got a manager who knows how to set them up and how to get the best out of them, that's a major step forward. As to whether that will be enough to keep you up, I say we went to the last day of the season and we were just fortunate enough to play a Leicester City that had clearly been on champagne for 48 hours. If we'd have had to play them with them needing even a point to win the title or whatever, I can't conceive that we would have won that game 2-0. I can't conceive that we would have won it in the way that we did. So if you bear all those factors in mind, any team that stays up can look back at certain games and sort of say, well, that went in our direction, that bit of luck, we got that penalty award or that decision wasn't given. You'll need some of that. He will give you a good chance of staying up. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's only fair to say, as we were reconciling ourselves to this time last year, well, we might have to go down and have a go at coming back up again. But having said that, if we had have gone down, I think he would have set us up well to come back up. There was a lot of parallels in John Eustace and Tony Mowbray. So Tony Mowbray came in sort of like, again, this time of the year, failed to keep us up. We went down, but he built a team over that summer that sort of like came back very, very strong from League One. And as a result of that, we sort of like, it re-energized the club. Now, it's a big gamble to take, and it's not one that I would have subscribed to. But looking back with hindsight, going down that season gave a generation of our fans a taste of success. It just sort of re-energized everybody, and it made us say, oh, actually, we can go to football matches expecting us to win. Ooh, this is unusual. I quite like this feeling. But of course, if you go down and you don't come back up straight away, then it becomes really, really tough. Really tough very, very quickly. So it's high stakes. You're far, far better staying in the division. He'll give you a good chance, as good a chance as anybody. But there are no guarantees in football.
Yeah, fair enough. And that warms my heart. And two dates for your diary. We don't play a team gunning for promotion on the final day. We have Stoke City at home, which could be a relegation dogfight, which doesn't sound fun. And Ian, we play Blackburn on March 8th. So hopefully,
oh yeah, that one's ringed in the calendar, my friend. So have no fears about that.
Hopefully, John's got some inside knowledge on the Rovers team, and we can get a nice victory there. But Ian Herbert from 4,000 Holes. Ian, thanks so much for spending the
My
last
pleasure.
half an hour with me or whatnot talking about John Eustace. Sorry he's leaving Rovers, but I think Derby fans are pretty excited that we're going to get someone who maybe has some championship pedigree more than Paul Warren. No disrespects to Paul, but he kind of had his ceiling at League One, and
Yeah,
we needed
yeah,
to move on. But Ian,
yeah.
thanks so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.